All rise. National District Court is now in session. Council Michael Bryan presiding.
Please be seated.
On the record.
State versus James Johnson. State ready to proceed?
I am, Your Honor.
Call your first witness.
State will call Officer McIsaac to the stand. Would you dare, officer, can you remain standing and raise your right hand, please? So do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God? May you sit? Would you state your name and occupation for the record, please?
My name is Timothy McIsaac. I'm a detective in the Criminal Investigation Bureau.
And specifically, what unit are you assigned to?
The Criminal Investigation Bureau.
Okay.
Currently.
Okay. And were you on duty with the National Police on March 20th of 2010?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And what were you doing on that day, I should say?
At that time, I was currently assigned to the Uniform Field Operations Bureau, the Fall 112 Policing Unit.
Okay. No one's unit?
Correct.
Okay. And how were you dressed?
I was in plain clothes. I have a police badge concealed in my clothing until I need to identify myself. I don't have a chain around my neck.
Okay. And if you could just briefly describe what that unit specializes in.
Primarily a reactive unit to problems within the city based upon current trends or observed behavior.
And who was your colleague that you were working with that day?
On that day, myself and Mr. Favre were in a unmarked police car.
Okay. And roughly around 5 in the afternoon, were you in the area of Library Hill, excuse me?
Yes, I was.
Okay. And what time did you arrive there?
Approximately 1700 or 5 p.m.
Okay. And what did you observe, calling your attention to that area of town?
We observed a large gathering of people, apparently a legalization of marijuana rally. At that time, we could observe in the air the distinct smell of freshly ground marijuana in that immediate area. Based upon that, we decided to investigate further.
Okay. And how did you investigate further?
Officer Favre parked the cruiser to the slight distance away. I proceeded on foot to the rear of the crowd.
Okay. And once you proceeded into the crowd, what happened?
I made observations of the young man smoking a marijuana cigarette. I was placed him in custody. Subsequent to that, we placed him in the back of our cruiser in an attempt to leave the area as the crowd started to become hostile toward us.
Okay. And did you, when you say you placed it in the back of your cruiser, was it an unmarked cruiser?
It was an unmarked cruiser. Yes.
Okay. And obviously you identified yourself to the gentleman that you had placed under arrest?
At that point, I had removed my badge, removed my clothing, identifying myself as a police officer. Yes.
Okay. And did Officer Defendant come and join you?
He did. Once he saw me placing the subject in the juvenile in custody, he responded to my location to assist me, also identifying himself as a police officer.
Okay. And what happened as you were, after you had placed the gentleman that you placed into custody in the back of your unmarked cruiser?
I sat in the back with the person we had in custody. Officer Favre was driving the vehicle when we attempted to leave. However, several persons stood in front of our vehicle, preventing us from doing so.
And where was your vehicle parked?
It was parked on Nashville Street.
Okay. And that's a public way, correct?
It is.
Okay. And who was in front of your vehicle prohibiting you from moving?
Several persons, to include the defendants at the defense table.
Okay. Let the record reflect that the witnesses identify the defendant.
Yes.
And what happened at that point when there were persons, including the defendant, in front of your unmarked cruiser?
I initially exited the vehicle, instructed all the persons in front of the car to remove themselves from the roadway and get out of the way of our vehicle. I came closer and further instructed them to remove themselves. I initially started speaking to one gentleman, who I later placed in custody for refusing to move from the roadway. While I was struggling with him to get him in custody, the defendant continued to refuse to leave the area and stepped on the roadway.
Okay. And when you and your colleague explaining to the defendant and to the others there to move out of the roadway so that you could exit the scene, the area?
We were continually giving verbal commands to leave and step back and provide us room because it became increasingly hostile and quite unsafe, I believe.
Okay. And again, you're in undercover or plain clothes, I would say, correct?
Correct.
But you have a badge displayed, correct?
The badge, correct, yes.
Okay. And were there a number of videos that were taken off of YouTube that were posted by an organization that the police department retrieved?
I have a number of videos, yes.
Okay. And do we have that here today?
Yes, we do.
The Army man approach to play with, I don't know if Mr. Johnson wants to.
I have an objection to playing YouTube videos.
Not playing what?
YouTube videos.
What's that?
That it's not proper evidence and raw video should have been asked for, and we need to interview the people behind the cameras to make sure the validity of the videos.
What's the state's response?
You know, the state would suggest that its item that was taken was untampered with by the police department. It was posted by an organization that, my understanding, is known as Keene Free State, or Free Keene State, and that
I think that she needs to prove that this organization actually exists too, because I've never heard of it.
Well, officer, where did you download this from?
We relocated several videos on YouTube through a search engine, I believe. And our IT personnel downloaded things to a compact disk.
And do the videos depict a fair amount of what was going on that afternoon, officer?
It does. It's
Objection.
continuous video.
What's the objection, sir?
They're discussing a video, which is not in evidence.
Well, she's trying to authenticate it, but she's allowed to do that with her question, so your objection's overruled.
And do they depict how some of the persons were working around the scene and different persons that you were instructing to move?
It does.
Okay. Does it also include the defendants in that?
No, without any objection. I'm going to sustain the defendant's objection because, frankly, he has a point that without verification of who took the video, even though it was on YouTube, and even though it may have been an organization he's knows or whatever, without verification of actually who actually took it, that they can verify it, and I will sustain the objection.
Okay, without the person who took the video, your objection?
Yes.
Is that okay? Officer, can you describe the scene probably in a little more detail than for the judge so that he understands what kind of atmosphere you and your colleagues were working under prior to other officers arriving that were in uniform?
At that time, there was just myself and Officer Fowler. And this person that was trying to place him in custody. He was on the ground on his knees resisting my efforts to place him in custody. I was leaning over him, trying to gain his compliance by speaking with him and place a second handcuff on him. At that time, the crowd stepped into the roadway surrounding both myself and Officer Fowler. We additionally had another person seated in the rear of our vehicle, creating multiple concerns of our safety, defendants escaping from custody, further exacerbating our fear of being surrounded. We instructed multiple times to the people in our general span of view and in our area to step back, and they're hindering our investigation, and they're causing a disturbance.
Okay, and in that instruction to the persons that were standing around you while you were trying to move or to exit the scene with a person you had in your custody, or how far were those persons when you were giving the instruction to move?
The defendant in question was within 2 to 3 feet of me, to my right.
Okay, and how many times did you and your colleague tell the defendant to move from the roadway?
I can't say for certain, but it was multiple times.
Okay. And did you move on the first order or the first instruction?
No, you're not.
Okay. At that point, did you place the defendant under arrest, officer?
Not at that time.
Okay, and why was that?
Based upon the hostile environment and the situation, it was deemed best to deal with that at a later time once we had further assistance at the scene.
Okay, and did you later seek an arrest warrant for the defendant?
Officer Fowler and I did seek an arrest warrant.
Okay, and that was out of National District Court?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And the arrest warrant was sought for what charge, officer?
Disorderly conduct.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Mr. Jonathan, do you have any questions of this officer?
Yes, would you describe the person that you think I was in front of
Mr.
me?
Johnson, please stand. It's expected you to stand. Go ahead.
Will you describe the person who was standing in front of the car?
At the time, you had a full beard, you had a dark colored shirt on, you were wearing a headscarf or bandana type thing, which was tied around your head.
And how do you identify me as that?
Through our investigation online and research of several websites, and to include research for other police departments.
Would you describe that research, please?
My partner, Officer Fabian, did most of that research, which led to your identification.
And you don't have any idea of how he led the person that was standing in front of that car to me?
Upon viewing you in person, I can clearly identify you as the person that was at that scene, yes.
Would you tell me about the composition of the crowd as you investigated that day?
I'm not sure I understand the question.
Racial composition.
There was several races there.
I'm going to object. I don't see the relevance of that question.
No, it's cross-examination. I'll allow it.
Okay.
There's multiple races there.
Give me a percentage. How many white people compared to black people?
Well, sir, what is relevant about the makeup of the audience?
I believe Officer McIsaac is bigoted. Was one of the reasons for the actions that day.
He's bigoted towards what?
Towards black people.
Yeah,
But you're not
to that
black.
comment.
My response to his actions that day was in direct response to his outrageous activity.
Well, you haven't filed any papers that I'm aware of, any kind of defense, affirmative defense that you were somehow acting in defending another. So I'm not going to, it doesn't matter what the makeup of the crowd is, so at this point I'm going to sustain the state's objection. Do you have any other questions?
Yes. You're an undercover police officer?
Plainclothes.
Plainclothes, which is not undercover.
No, it's not.
So when you're walking around as a civilian, that's not undercover? What's the difference?
I'm in the capacity of working as a police officer at the time.
And another undercover police officer does not work for the police department?
They have a different role though.
I'm not quite clear on that. What is the difference between a plainclothes police officer and an undercover police officer? Do you assume a different identity as an undercover police officer?
I can't speak to exactly all the semantics of a undercover police officer, but I can tell you that as a plainclothes police officer, I'm on active patrol and I intercede with crimes in progress when I need to identify myself as a police officer.
You're part of the Special Problems Unit?
A problem-oriented police unit I was previously.
What problem were you investigating that day?
Use of illegal substance.
And you saw people using an illegal substance?
Initially observed the smell of illegal substance in the air, and I investigated further.
Okay. You take an oath as a police officer?
Yes, I did.
What was that oath?
I'm going to object. I don't see what the relevance is.
Oh, again, it's cross.
Exactly your question is, sir.
What was your oath you took as a police officer?
To uphold the state constitution, the United States Constitution, and protect and serve the citizens of the national and whatever is deemed necessary for me from the city of Alton.
Okay. Under what part of that oath were you acting when you arrested this person for the illegal substance?
Under the state statutes.
What part of your oath were you upholding?
I'm going to object. We're not here for the other person who's in custody for another charge. We're here for the defendant.
I agree that the oath isn't the important part of it, but he is licensed or authorized to when he sees to be a violation of the laws of the state of New Hampshire to arrest the person. So we'll move on to another question, sir.
All right. Do you have any moral problems with your job? No. You would arrest somebody for anything that was against the law?
It's my job to do so.
There is nothing morally important that you would stop at arresting somebody for?
I'm not sure the nature of your question.
As a wild example, would you arrest the Negro if he was, if the law says that you had to arrest him for running away?
Your Honor, I'm going to object. I think that the question, the line of
I
question.
don't understand the question. I don't understand the question. You're saying if the law said that if a black person was running away, he had to be arrested, would he arrest him? Or that
Yes.
If a person were running away?
Now, if a black person were found in New Hampshire and it was illegal for a black person to be in New Hampshire, would you arrest him?
No, I'm going to object to that. It's
I'm
not relevant.
going to sustain the state's objection. There is no such law, so it is irrelevant.
What would you say the demeanor of the person standing in front of the police car was?
I'm going to object, Judge. I'm not sure which person he's referring to, if he's referring to another person or if he's referring to himself. I'm unclear on the question. I have to assume the officer's unclear.
Since the trial is about me, Your Honor, I would ask him if the person he's describing as me, what was that person violent? Was he upset? Was he screaming? Was he yelling? Can you describe it?
You were calm, but at the time when you were in the roadway, but you were not compliant.
Okay, so did that person harm anybody?
Not that I saw.
So did you pick him up and move him out of the roadway?
Are you speaking about yourself or about the
I'm
defendant?
speaking about the person who was in front of the car.
Well, there's multiple people in front of the car.
He's speaking about the person you have identified as being him. That he is not admitting it's him, but that you identified as being him.
I did not pick you up. I think you're referring to the other person I was placed in custody, sir, correct?
Did you drive away from the scene eventually?
Eventually, yes.
Did you drive over that person?
I'm still unclear on who you're talking about, sir.
The person you're describing as me, who was standing in front of the car, did you run him over on your way out?
No, I did not.
So, did any other police officer move him?
At that time, I moved the person I was placed in custody to the rear of the cruiser, so I'm unsure how you moved yourself in the roadway.
Well, you still say it's me, but you have no idea what happened to the person who was standing in front of the car. He was there, you told him to move, and you drove away.
Several minutes after instructing you to leave from the roadway, you did not. Once additional units came to the scene,
So it's your testimony that...
Sorry, you gotta let him finish. Just-
once additional units came to the scene, the subject I was placed in custody, I brought to the rear of my cruiser where I dealt with him. I'm unsure what manner if you left the roadway based upon another officer's instruction, but at the time you were non-compliant to my instructions, and that's what led to your arrest.
So you're, as far as you know, the person who was standing in front of the police car obeyed your instruction. Is that correct?
No, you're not.
But the man was there, and then he wasn't, and you didn't run him over.
Several times you were instructed to move from the roadway by myself and the other officer, Officer Father, and you did not.
Did the person in front of the car disrupt your investigation?
Yes, you did.
How?
By not removing yourself from the roadway, it created a further hostile situation.
You said I wasn't hostile, though, or the person in front of the car was not hostile.
The hostility came from the crowd further encircling us. And you by preventing us from leaving the area, led to that crowd encircling us.
So, you claim this person was a threat, correct?
Which person are you speaking of?
I speaking about myself. I'm speaking about the person who was in front of the car.
Well, there were multiple people in front of the car, sir.
I'm speaking about the person that you have identified as being him.
Yes, sir. Yeah. Repeat your question, please, sir.
You said that person was hostile and was not...
I did not say you were hostile, no, sir.
Did you face him the entire time?
No, not the entire time, no, sir.
You turned your back on somebody that you were threatened by?
I never said I was threatened by you. I said the crowd was encircling us and it was a threatening situation.
So I don't understand. Was the person standing in the circle that was threatening you?
Your Honor, I'm going to object to his
The question's been asked and answered, sir. He's testified that the person who's identified to be you was standing in front of the car and when instructed by himself and another police officer did not remove themselves from in front of the vehicle.
I believe he said he did not know if another officer instructed that person.
After he and his partner at the time had instructed you, later, his testimony is that later he did not know how or why you left the roadway, but initially his testimony was that the person he identifies as you did not leave the roadway when first instructed to by him.
By your language, respectfully, I believe you're assuming that that was me in front of the car.
He has testified that he believes it was you.
All right.
Any other questions?
No, no.
All right, thank you. Mr. May, step down.
Single call officer, the bill, please stand. Follow. Sorry. Officer, can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
May I be seated? Do you state your name and occupation for the record, please?
Matthew DeFava, DeFava's D-I-F-A-V-A, and I'm a police officer for the city of Nashville.
Okay, and how long have you been so employed?
Approximately 6.5 years.
Okay, and were you on duty with the National Police on March 20th of this year?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and what unit were you assigned to on that date?
The pop unit, the problematic police unit.
Okay, I want to just skip that just a little bit. And were you and Officer Isaac partners working that day?
We were, yes.
Okay, and roughly around 5 p.m. in the afternoon on that date, were you at Library Hill?
Yes, we were.
And what part of the city is that in?
It's in the northern end of the city, at the north end of Main Street, as it intersects with Amherst Street and Concord Street.
Okay, and what drew your attention to that area of town?
At that time, there was a large group of individuals congregating on the memorial area of Library Hill. There were several people chanting phrases to legalize the use of marijuana. There was people holding homemade signs advocating the use of marijuana and the legalization of marijuana. We also observed an individual with a megaphone chanting phrases at passing vehicular and pedestrian traffic. We also observed several clouds of smoke coming from different parts of the crowd. As we surveilled it further, we could detect a strong odor of freshly burned marijuana coming from the crowd.
And you based that smell on your training experience?
Yes.
Okay, and what did you do once you and your partner noted those signs?
At that time, Officer McIsaac got out on foot while I maintained surveillance in our unit. Officer McIsaac entered the crowd, and within several seconds of him entering the crowd, I observed him place an individual into custody.
Okay, once he placed that individual into custody, what did you do as a result?
That's when I drove my unit onto Nashville Street, just north of the memorial. We were facing easterly. I exited my cruiser, which was parked in the roadway, made my way onto the memorial area, and assisted Officer McIsaac in his arrest.
Okay, and again, this vehicle was an unmarked cruiser, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, and when you went to go to assist Officer McIsaac, what happened?
We placed the individual into handcuffs. We escorted him down to our cruiser, where we placed him in the rear driver's side of the vehicle. At that time, as we were escorting the individual to our unit, the entire crowd started to proceed down to our unit, onto the sidewalk, onto the street.
Okay, and can you estimate how many persons were around the cruiser or at the demonstration? If you can give a ballpark figure?
At the demonstration, I'd have to say roughly 50 to 70 people, maybe.
Okay, and were some persons carrying firearms?
There were numerous people openly carrying firearms, yes.
Okay, and in addition, you smelled the odor of marijuana burning?
Yes.
Okay, and once you placed that person in the cruiser, you, in the back of your cruiser, behind you, were you the operator of the cruiser?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and where was Officer McIsaac?
Officer McIsaac sat in the rear passenger side of the vehicle.
Okay, and at that time, were you and Officer McIsaac taking the person you had in custody to the police department?
We were attempting to, yes.
Okay, and what happened? What interrupted that?
At that time, several people stood in front of the vehicle. Several feet in front of the vehicle. We actually attempted to drive forward. We inched forward. When we saw that they weren't moving, we stopped the vehicle, and Officer McIsaac initially exited the vehicle to deal with those subjects while I stayed in the vehicle with our prisoner.
Okay, and how did that go, Officer McIsaac from the front? Did the persons take heed to his instructions to move from the cruiser so that you could exit the scene?
No, they did not. Several people still stood in front of the cruiser. One person actually sat down in the roadway.
Okay, and what happened at that point? What involvement did you?
At that point, I radioed for assistance. Noticed that the situation was becoming increasingly hostile, and that our safety was being compromised due to us having a prisoner in the back of the vehicle. Our movements were limited. We weren't able to exit the area. There were several people surrounding the vehicle, some of which had firearms on them. At that point, I exited the vehicle to assist Officer McIsaac with the individual he was placing under arrest.
Okay, and what did you do at that point once you exited?
I began to instruct several people to move from the roadway, one of which was the defendant who was seated at the defense table.
Okay, let the record reflect that this is also identified defendant. And did you also give the instruction to the defendant to move from the roadway?
I did several times, yes.
Okay, and did he take heed to your instructions?
He did not.
Okay, and what happened, officer?
It was several seconds to a minute before additional units began to arrive at the scene. At that point, the defendant was still in front of our cruiser. We were dealing with a subject who was seating on the ground, who was resisting arrest. Also, we were concerned with our passenger who was in the rear seat of the vehicle and the crowd encircling us. When the backup units responded, we lifted the individual who was seated on the ground to the rear of the vehicle and was able to place him under custody, and the situation began to somewhat become under control.
Okay, and at that point, you didn't place the defendant under arrest, is that correct?
We did not.
Okay, and did you seek an arrest warrant?
I did, yes.
Okay, and was that based on the information that you gave to Judge Ryan today in the testimony?
Yes, it was.
Okay, and National Street is a public way in the city of Nashua, is that correct?
It is, yes.
Okay, thank you.
Mr. Johnson, any questions?
Were we on Nashua Street, or did this happen on Nashua Street?
Nashville Street.
Nashville Street.
congregating on the memorial area. They were chanting, yelling at passing vehicular, pedestrian traffic.
What were they chanting?
I don't recall that it was advocating the use of marijuana.
And yelling, were they angry?
They weren't angry, they were just chanting and raising their voice a little.
So you'd say the demeanor of the crowd was good, happy, no violence going on?
Other than them maybe disrupting local businesses in the area with or pedestrian or vehicular traffic. I can't say for sure if they were.
I'm sorry, that last statement. You said the group was on Library Hill?
Yes.
Is there a sidewalk that's normally used by business traffic around that?
Yes, there's a sidewalk around that.
And you actually saw people being disrupted?
They were, one individual was actually using a megaphone yelling at passing vehicular and pedestrian traffic. We weren't able to stop any of that traffic.
So that's the disruption, somebody on a megaphone?
Yes, in addition to other things, yeah.
But you would describe the crowd as happy, maybe?
I did not describe it as being happy, no.
Okay, they weren't angry though?
Not from what I could tell, no.
Having a good time, or people smiling?
I could not tell.
You didn't take note of such things?
I did not know.
When did the crowd turn on you?
After we were escorting the first initial arrest to our unit.
So you would testify that you're the ones who made them angry?
We did not know.
Crowd not angry, you show up, and then crowd angry, does that not follow for you?
No, it doesn't.
So, I'm not allowed to ask you any racial composition of the crowd. Was there any difference between the man you arrested and the rest of the people there?
I think that's the same question. Use of different words.
He was younger than everyone. We answered that, yeah.
Did you see anybody smoking bongs in this crowd?
I did not observe any bongs. We observed clouds of smoke coming from the crowd.
Why did you arrest this man? What made him stand out from the rest of the crowd?
I'm going to object, Judge, because again, now, for the record, to be clear, I'm not sure which man he's referring to.
He was referring to the first person arrested for possession of marijuana.
Okay.
But it's my understanding it wasn't this officer that arrested him, it was the previous officer who testified that arrested him. I'll sustain the objection.
Said the crowd was yelling, but after the arrest?
It was before and after this.
What were they yelling after?
After calling us Nazis, no victim, no crime. You should be ashamed of yourselves. Your kids will smoke marijuana someday. There was some derogatory comments being thrown towards our direction, yes.
Which one was derogatory?
Sir, I'm going to object. I don't see the relevance here.
I'm not sure I see the relevance either, but I think calling someone a Nazi would be considered derogatory. So, why don't you ask another question?
If something smells like a rose and looks like a rose, is it a rose?
Not sure. That's really
You're not sure?
relevant.
You're not concerned with relevance. These two people are. Can you answer the question?
Sir, I'm going to object. I was going to let that go because I
To the
don't.
extent that you're trying to intimate that the police's actions were those of the same type of actions as the Nazis took, then I'm going to grant the objection and, or sustain the objection and ask you to ask another question.
If I change it to just a KKK member, is that more palatable?
No.
So you handled the tracing of the person in front of the car to me?
I did, yes.
How did you do that?
We submitted a request for the New Hampshire driver's license, which we received. We also obtained your Facebook page, which had several photos of you. We also contacted Keene Police Department, who viewed some of this footage and also identified you.
So you didn't look at the driver's license and say that's the guy, you had to depend on other people?
That was in addition, there were several means of identification.
Are you going to have the Keene police and the other people involved in this chain of evidence here?
I don't know that there's any chain of evidence. You asked him how he did it, he explained how he did it. So.
No further questions.
Any questions?
No, no further questions.
Step down. Any other witnesses for the state?
I can call Officer Moriarty, Judge, it's going to be some of the same, I don't know if that's...
That's up to you whether you want to or not.
It'll be brief, Judge.
Okay.
Officer Moriarty. Can you raise your right hand, please? Do you swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth, so help you God?
I do.
May I proceed? You state your name and occupation for the record, please.
Officer Todd Moriarty of the National Police Department. Currently assigned to Uniform Patrol K-9.
Okay, and how long have you been in law enforcement?
I've been in law enforcement for 15 years. I've been with the city of Nashville for over 8.5.
Okay, and prior to that, where were you before?
Massachusetts, Sheffield.
Okay, and you were on duty with the National Police on the 20th day of March of this year, is that correct?
Yes, I was.
Okay, and did you hear radio calls coming in from your colleagues, Officer McIsaac and Officer DeFeva?
I did. I heard them call for assistance. It sounded kind of urgent by their voices. I also could hear a large crowd in the background, several voices. Couldn't make it out what it was, but they had called for assistance, and it was an urgent call. So we had stepped it up to lights and sirens for their assistance and their safety.
Okay, and where did you find the unmarked cruiser that Officer DeFeva and Officer Moriarty had Officer McIsaac, I'm sorry, had a person in custody in the back seat of?
I believe I was number 1 or number 2 on the scene after the two officers were out. Their car was at the corner of Nashville and Amherst Street on Nashville Street. When I had pulled up, Officer McIsaac was dealing with a subject that was seated in front of his cruiser. There were several subjects in front of the cruiser, one being the defendant. Officer DeFava and Officer McIsaac were asking these subjects to move. At that time, the crowd would be becoming very hostile, coming towards the officers that were showing up, stepping onto the roadway off of the sidewalk, blocking us from even getting onto the scene. At that time, I pulled out my K-9 partner for crowd control to back the crowd up and to get them back away from Officer DeFava and Officer McIsaac so that they could do their job
And exit the scene.
and exit the scene safely so no one got hurt.
Okay, and you pointed you noticed the defendant there when you arrived on the scene when Officer McIsaac and DeFava were outside.
Yes, he was in front of the cruiser while they were trying to deal with the subject on the ground. There was another female there that was leaning over Officer McIsaac and Officer DeFava trying to videotape them getting red in their face, and I later subsequently had her arrested. I could not take her into custody for the fact that I was had my partner in my hands, but another officer did.
Okay.
And it was becoming, when patrol arrived, it was a hostile environment for coming towards these officers, surrounding them in 360 degrees. They had one subject in custody in the back of the cruiser. They were dealing with several other ones, and it was becoming more of a hostile situation. There were several people there with firearms. That was a concern of everybody there. Megaphones and people chanting things and yelling at the officers on scene.
Okay, thank you. Let the record reflect that the witness is identified the defendant.
Yes.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Johnson, do you have any questions of the officer?
Were you present when I was brought into booking in Nashville?
No, sir.
Do you know if the warrant on me was delivered correctly?
I don't. I had nothing to do with the warrant or the investigation that followed up to identifying you. I did notice you by your beard and clothing you were wearing that day. And after talking with these officers during the investigation, that was identified as you.
On this type of warrant, is a Nashville police officer supposed to go out and be along?
Again, sir, like I stated before, I had nothing to do with the warrant that was served or any of that part of the investigation, so I cannot answer those questions for you.
No further questions.
Thank you, Officer Mariani. Step down.
Thank you, Your Honor.
State rest?
The state does rest, Your Honor.
All right. Mr. Johnson, do you have any witnesses you wish to present?
No.
All right. And based on the evidence presented to the court makes a finding of guilty. It's a statement of recommendation in regards to the fine.
Your Honor, the state will recommend a $750 fine with a 500 suspended with a 1-year window of good behavior.
All right. Mr. Johnson, your response?
No, they put me in jail 4 days for this, and anything beyond that would be...
So you've been 4 days pre-trial?
Yes.
All right. Thank you. $700 fine, 500 of which is suspended. Penalty assessment is suspended. $200 fine has been paid by 4 days of pretrial confinement. Balance of the fine is suspended for 1 year upon your good behavior, meaning you're not committing any felonies, misdemeanors, or serious motor vehicle violations during that period of time. Do you understand?
I cannot accept that.
Well, it's your option to appeal to the New Hampshire Supreme Court. You can do that. All right, that takes care of this matter.
Thank you, Your Honor. Handle the video.
Yes. All right, we'll take a short recess.
All right.
That was paid by the fact that he did 4 days.
Oh.
So he basically
you're
got,
scot-free.
the sentence was, well, the sentence was...
If you'd been found
what he'd
innocent,
already
would they have given you $200?
Exactly what they did.
Which part?
It says, something about.
They do it over and over and over again. If you've already gone to jail, you're going to be found
Have to
guilty,
find you
you're going to be
guilty.
charged with
Yeah, I think
it.
it doesn't matter
No, it's
the facts of the
it's
case.
that I'm on probation for a year that really sucks.
Well, yeah, they'll get you again. You know it.
So there's probation.
If
so-
you use
To
your
serve
free
the one
speech in-
day?
That's what I was.
If you use your free speech in
Is
an
that what it was?
unacceptable manner,
Yeah.
they're going to get you again.
Good behavior for a year.
But she didn't say anything about probation. She said
Suspended sentence.
window of good behavior.
So she'll
That's-
Before you leave, ask the clerk.
we have another thing coming over from the commission?
Okay.
Excuse me, may I get a quick interview from you here? Why is it that you are? Why is it that you're aggressing against peaceful people? Doesn't that bother you? Is it hard to sleep at night?
Who's the victim?
Yeah. Why is there a crime if there's no victim? Can you explain that?
Is it that the incentive is for you guys to arrest people for as much stuff as you can to have your jobs? Just to make more things felonies and arrest peaceful people for not doing anything?
Why do you call people subjects? That's what I want to ask in the
Think
next
about when
trial.
you guys take off your badge and go home tonight, think about what you guys are doing to people.
Yeah, but who do you call them?
You guys are the people that are making us the victims. You guys are the criminals. And you think you're justified for your actions because you have a piece of metal on your uniform on a silly costume. If I went in there and kidnapped you, I would be arrested. I would rightfully, you know, someone would rightfully have a claim against me, but they weren't hurting anybody. And you guys just do this like it's a game, like it's a big charade. You don't have to be accountable for your actions.
See no evil, speak no evil, hear no evil.
Right. Google voluntarism, guys. Think for yourself.
This program is brought to you by FreeKeen.com. FreeKeen.com features audio, video, and blogs chronicling the transition to a voluntary society. FreeKeen.com also has comments and discussion forums so you can be heard. FreeKeen.com.